I love maps because on every square inch of the page is 1,000 miles of detail. Because every stroke of the pen tells you more about the world than 1,000 words can. Because you can compress forests and deserts and mountains and rivers to simple scratches on the page and let the imagination figure out the rest. I like maps because they are the foundation of world building. Hello adventurers and welcome back to the Red Quills. My name is Ryan and today is day 29 of the Red Quills Mapvember Challenge, and this is the last map that I will be working on. I have tomorrow, you can make sure that you're scheduled for it, the live stream that I'll be using to finalize this month's work, and we'll be talking about everything that I've created, and I'll look back on what I've done, and I'll give a bit more detail about the things that I haven't really had time to go into, and we can catch up and reminisce before finishing up the challenge then. But today is the last opportunity to create a map. Before then, I'm really cramming things in now, and this is the opportunity to create a map of our realms. So in this episode, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a map of my lands within the world of Requield. If you haven't been following along with the monthly challenge, then welcome. You are coming in right at the end now. And what you can do is check out the start of this series to get a bit more of an understanding of what I've been doing for this entire time. You can check out the playlist. There are now 29 videos on that playlist and at least 29 maps if you don't count me making smaller maps as part of the challenge. And this is my opportunity to do the one map I actually haven't done yet, which is a map of the region of Anakos. I haven't actually done a realm map in this entire month. I have done the world map. I have done island maps. I have done dungeons for dragons and hags and mummies. I have done quest maps and coded maps and tattooed maps. I have done ancient necropolises and modern metropolises. I have done everything you could possibly want to flesh out this world. And now is the opportunity to kind of bring it all together. And the reason that I left it this long is partly because I really wanted to make sure that I had a lot of information down, but also because as I make this and as you can look at it yourselves, you can see all of the references to the previous 28 videos right here on this map. You can see all the city-states that I've referred to, all of the dungeons, all of the individual locations that we've gone through. The parts of this map are taken from all of the previous maps we've done over this month, and it is the logical capstone for what we're working on here. But in this video today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down the different levels of this map, the processes that I use to make it, and we're going to talk about what makes a realm map useful to you as a DM. So let's get out our paper, our watercolor paints, and our ink, and let's get started. Now, I want to differentiate today the differences between some of the maps that I've done previously on the Red Quills to the map that I'm doing right now. And in pretty much all of them, I've talked about the general process and keeping it nice and tidy and not adding in too much detail, because generally speaking, our audience for a map when we make it like this is for the players or the readers of the story that we are telling. We want them to be able to find anything on a map nice and quickly. We want them to be able to read it. We don't want them to be overwhelmed with information, because that's just going to intimidate them from the story and it's going to stop them from actually using the map. So whenever we've created a map in the past, we've held on to those tenets, that it must be clear and easy to read, that it must be, tidy to look at, that you don't want too many contradicting details within the small space of the map itself. And what we're going to do today is we're going to throw that out the window, because this map is not for the players. What I'm going to work on right now is a map for you, for the game master, the dungeon master, the author, something that crams in all of the planning that you are doing and compresses it to a sort of symbolic pictographic style that shows you the details that you've already put into the world. This is a reference point for you, for someone who already knows the world. It is not a tool for a handout for the players. And so that's what we're working on today. The capstone of this month, an understanding of the realm that we spent so much time fleshing out so that you can use it and refer to it. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start with an A3 piece of paper. Now, normally I do these on A2, And the reason that I'm doing on A3 is because I don't have as much time today. And indeed, I have a slight disclaimer today. And the disclaimer is that I actually did not get time to finish this map today, which, you know, in all fairness to me, I think that's a pretty good achievement. This is the only video over the course of the last month that I have not managed to finish the map on the day that I wanted to come out with the video. And I will finish it, by the way. I will upload it to the Patreon. You will be able to take a look at it. It's just that I'll finish it later today or tomorrow once I finish this video. It's just that I have time constraints. But the amount of detail, the sheer scale of what we're trying to compress onto this map meant that it took me, it took me about 5 hours to get to the point where I had to put it down, and it'll probably take me another 3 to finish it off. So we're looking at a fairly complex map here, even on an A3 page. So that's the kind of task we're revving up to do here. On this A3 piece of paper, I'm using a nice thick 180 GSM watercolor paper because I am going to use watercolors just to draw the eye. And I'm going to use some various thicknesses and colors of Fineliner pens as well. Now, if you want the materials, they are in the description below. But as we go through, I'm going to talk about the processes that I'm using to create the map. And I'm also going to talk about what kind of details we're adding into it and how we're adding into that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to split this into the various parts of the map. There's 3 real layers that this map shows us about the world, and we'll split them up and talk about them as I'm fleshing them out. And the very first thing that we need to do is start with the sketch. Now, I have compiled this sketch over the last month, and it is filled to the brim with all the various names and references and details that I have put into the Required Legend Keeper. And if you want to check out the Legend Keeper, the wiki of everything that we've put together over the course of this month, I'm still adding everyone's submissions to it, by the way. I've gotten a lot in the last day or so. So it'll be updated over the next few days too, but you can check that out. You can see everything that we've done, all the different maps that have been submitted, all the different parts of Required, and just get a real understanding of the scale of the commitment that we've gotten from this community over the past month. But all of the details that I already have on there are referenced on this map. We have the locations of the various dungeons and the various cities and city-states and the different, references to monsters and allegiances and cultures and ecologies. And so what I need to do is put that into a sketch first to make sure that I'm going to actually be able to fit all of the words on the map. That's the first thing you kind of need to figure out, because if your map is too messy for you to read, then you're not going to have a good map when you finish off. So sketch it first, make sure you can fit everything on, because then we've got to talk about this hierarchy of information that we're going to be sticking on it. Whenever you create a map, you always have to ask yourself, what is the most important piece of information and what is least important? You've got to rank it in order of what information you need to have on the map. And generally speaking, let's take the first layer of information that we'll have on a map. That's the political layer, or the civilized layer. This kind of information that you see on a map will start with, large scale kingdoms and regions. And then it'll go further down and you'll have different duchies or counties or states. Even further down, you'll have capitals, major cities. Further down than that, you have towns and villages. Then you have roads, you have ruins, you have places of religious significance. Now, depending on how significant they are to the culture at hand, though the order of that list will be, up and down. But that kind of level of priority is what you've got to keep in mind when you're doing the sketch. Because if you get to a point where the sketch is very crowded in a particular area, you're going to have to drop some details. And that list of priorities is there to help you figure out what you need to drop. Roads are easy. You can just imply where they go underneath the labels. But if you have to decide between showing where a capital is or showing where a village is, you're going to need to drop the village. If it's a choice between a dungeon or a town, which is more important for you to know where it is? What is the kind of exactitude that you need on your map? What's the priority list we've got here? So that's why we have that list. We have an understanding of what you need to put where so that it is easy for you to navigate the map. So keeping that in mind at the sketch level, we're then going to come in and start doing these layers. Now, as I mentioned, that first layer is the political layer. There are 2 other layers. We have the geographical layer, and that's all the sort of landscape details that we have in the map. That's the coastline, the hills, the mountain ranges. These kinds of things you stick on the map because they are obstacles to the traveler and because they define the landscape around the locations that your players will be traveling to, or your readers will be looking from. If you're in a city, you really want to know what the horizon looks like, what the weather is going to be like, whether there's a river there. Those details will help you to flesh the world out more and describe it to your players. Those are big, unchanging details. They're not the backdrop. They're the canvas on which you'll paint the story. So that's the level there, and we've got these kinds of details on it. You want to have mountains, you want to have coastlines, you want to have hills and rivers and lakes. And again, you've got to figure out what your priority list is there. Rivers are generally down the bottom because you can imply the route of a river. Mountains and coastlines are generally at the top. Those are very important for you to know. The third layer is the ecology, and I'm separating this from the landscape because these kinds of things you can either be really, really detailed with or not at all detailed with. When you create a handout for your players, it's not really important for them to know what kind of forest is growing in this particular part of the map. It's not super important for them to understand, what the rainfall is going to be like in this center of the desert. That's not the detail that they'll be needing, and it's too much detail for them to really get a good view of the world. But it is important for you if you are describing the world and you're exploring the history and the culture of the people that live there. And so this level of detail is about description. The first level of detail, the political layer, is about the story itself, the people that they will meet and the places they will go. The second layer of detail is the canvas, the broad strokes of what the world looks like, what they'll see if they look out a window. The third layer is the filling, the adjectives of the sentence that you're making here. What are the trees look like? What are the grasslands like? How often does it rain? What are the winters like? What does the wind smell like? All of these kinds of details come together to paint this picture. And those three layers are what you're really going to want to look at. So I have 3 layers on this map. As I've gone through, you can see that I started by doing the broad strokes of the continent itself. I used watercolors to outline the coastlines and the lakes, and then I went in and I started doing some of the political layer with the watercolors. Now, the reason that I do the watercolors first is, of course, because I don't want the ink to run. If you are working with both, paint first, wait for it to dry, and then come in with the ink so that it doesn't bleed. It's just the easiest way to do things. There are other ways of doing it, but if you're new to it, that is the process that I would recommend most easily. You will also need to make sure that most of the pencil lines are erased or that they're very accurate before you start painting, because they will show up underneath the watercolors if they're too dark. So as we've gone through, do the sketch, erase it, do some watercolors, wait for them to dry, and then we can come in with the ink and we can start on those layers. You can see that I've used a thick pen on the coastlines and then thinner and thinner pens for the less and less significant details. The coastline is very important, so we do that in the thick pen. The lakes are important as well. The mountains are important, so I'm using a combination of shading with the watercolors and some pen as well. As we go through and we do the labels, you've got nice big labels for the capitals and the city-states and smaller labels for the individual locations, the towns and the villages. I'm using different colors to separate the different kinds of forests and deserts and roads and rivers, and that makes sense as well. We've got to keep it into a broad spectrum though, so that it's easy for the eye to understand. Generally speaking, reds are political, greens and browns are natural, blues, always water. Nice and easy. So let's talk about the political layer and what I've got on here. Now, the most significant detail that I've added to this map that I don't normally do are these coats of arms that I've added above the city. These round sigils that show a little bit about the history and give us an understanding of what the city prioritizes. There are 24 of them on this map, and they all have a history and a culture that I already referenced in the Legend Keeper, and we've fleshed them out a little bit more. And because they're the most important, they are the ones that I work on first. They're the focus of attention. They're more important than the labels, and they're more important than whatever villages or towns will be underneath those sigils, because they are the significant places within the political landscape and within the story itself. Underneath those, I then do the capitals and the towns and villages, and then the roads and the significant locations like the market fairs or the ruins. However, there are other details that I'm adding here as well. Earlier in the series, I created the trade map in which I used a series of dots to show the size of the markets in each of the individual towns and villages and what kind of goods you would be able to buy in those cities. And I'm going to bring that back and use that here. I'm going to differentiate between paved highways and unpaved roads, which will impact on how quickly a person on foot or a rider will be able to cross those distances. I will also, on the longer stretches, have the amount of time that it will take to cross from one end of the road to the other, from the furthest points. And that's going to help me as a world builder describe what it takes to cross this continent. I will also be working in blues on the sea to add the nautical versions of those, the shipping routes between the various cities on the outside of the continent, and give those as well an understanding of how long it's going to take to travel from one point to another. All of these details are going to be important for me to know. We need to know cultures, we need to know names, we need to know distances, and we need to know travel time. Then we come into the geographical layer. As mentioned, I've done the coastlines, the mountains, the lakes and the rivers, and I also have labels for the various regions as well. And I'm only using black pens for this because I want to differentiate it from the political and the ecological layers. The political layers, I'm only really working in reds, browns, and on the sea in blue. Otherwise, I'm not going to differentiate between colors except on the sigils because that's significant, but I want to keep that as simple as possible. So reds, blues, and browns are for that political layer. The geographical layer, I'm working in grayscale, and then on the final layer, that ecological layer, that'll get the browns and the greens as well. But really, the reason that I work on the geographical layer second is because a lot of what you can see in the physical landscape is going to reference the ecological landscape, or vice versa. So once I have an understanding of what goes where, physically speaking, it'll help me to remember as I go through and flesh the rest of the map out what the weather, the water, the temperature is going to be like in various parts of the map. So as I go through with these blue and brown pens and I start to flesh out where the marshlands are, where the jungles are, where the deserts are, the mountain ranges, the lakes, where the coastline is, they will all help me to flesh that out. And there is a whole mess of information that you can take into account when you're creating your worlds as to how the climate will be changed by the presence of coastlines, by its latitude, and by, using mountain ranges to shepherd the weather in a particular way. And I'm kind of using that a little bit here, but I'm only going to go into the broad strokes. If you want me to do a video on climate and maps, then I can absolutely do that, but there are some excellent tutorials out there that you can check out on YouTube already. But generally speaking, as I go through and I do the ecology, I can see that there are various zones in this map according to the latitude and longitude. Now this map is south facing, so the top of the map is near to the equator, so it's going to be very warm. And to that end, keeping in mind that latitude and where the mountain ranges are, I want to be aware of where the rainfall is going to be and where it's going to be extremely hot, because the difference between a jungle and a desert is not necessarily the heat, it is the amount of water you get. And so the presence of a mountain range is going to show a massive difference in whether you have the one or the other. And in this case, I do have both. On the western side of the continent, on the right-hand side, I have a lot of jungle, a lot of marshlands, because as the wind comes off the seas to the west, it brings the rain in there, and they have monsoons, and it's a large bowl-shaped valley that captures a lot of the rain. The rain doesn't travel over the mountains into the eastern part of the continent, and so that is a large desert right there. You've got savannas towards the north as it moves further away from the equator, but as you get closer and closer to the equator, it gets more and more bare until you get to the coastline, at which point you've got mangroves and reeds. And this is the layer where I'm going to add a lot of detail that wasn't in the sketch, and the only reason that I can do that is because I did the geographical layer first, and I had a look at where the wind was going to be blowing from, what are the external factors that I've got to take into consideration here. But it does mean that I can look at it and I can be like, okay, cool. We've got a band of a desert in the center of the continent at the top. We've got that large bowl-shaped valley, which is full of jungle over to the right. To the bottom of the map, which is, further to the north, further away from the equator, will get more temperate. And I kind of am thinking about this more or less as Australia, because I'm familiar with the geography in terms of various zones here. Now, I do have to take into consideration as well that there is a continent off to the east, to the left of the map here, which has an enchanted winter in it as well, which means that my weather's going to be a little bit, weird because of that on that side of the country. But I'm going to be using a lot of different kinds of symbols here to show the different kinds of forests and plants that you can encounter, from sandy and rocky deserts through to jungles and palm forests, through to acacia forests or mangroves. I've got cypress trees and redwood forests and reeds and desolations. I've got boab trees. I've got savanna grasslands. I've got tropical forests and temperate forests as you go further and further north. And by changing the symbols and using the same colors, but just altering the little icons that I'm using for the trees, I can apply so much for my own understanding of what this continent looks like. And that's the reason we leave it for last, because it uses as much of the available space as possible in order to flesh out the world, but it tells us so much. So you've got to prioritize first that political stuff, because that's the meat and bones of the story. Then the geography, because that will tell us a lot about the bones of the world and help us to flesh out the third layer, which is the ecology, which is the description of the world itself. So if you go from one to the other, you should end up with a product that looks more or less like this. We have so many details on here, and it's not even finished yet. I'm going to go through and finish off the ecological layer. What I will probably do is come in as I'm rendering this video and add in some clips later on of the different icons that I've used, so we can take a closer look at the finished map probably tomorrow when I do the live stream, and you can see it then. I know that this has been a very broad understanding of creating a realm map. I do have more videos on it. You can check them out in the playlist above. And if you want me to talk about anything in particular, as always, you can tag me, you can comment at me. I will make some more videos in the future after I've had a little bit of a nap after Mapvember has finished. Let me know what you think of this priority trio that I have here, this order of creating your maps and what you can add into them. I have also got a list of things that you can add onto it, and you can download the finished map on the Patreon as soon as I have finished it. But until tomorrow, when I will see you in the live stream, happy mapping. Good luck if you're finishing off the Mapvember challenge, and I will talk to you then. See you later. Tigris, I swear to God.